We are now recording.
Okay, so I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:31, not 6:30, and we are going to have two executive sessions today. The first one's going to be at the beginning of the meeting, and the second one's going to be at the end of the meeting. And so the first one is, I'm going to tell you about the other additions and corrections to the agenda real quick. So I'm going to tell you about the other changes to the agenda really quickly, and then we'll quickly go into executive session, and we'll come out at about 7 o'clock for those of you who would like to join us for the regular part of the meeting. So where are we? We will be, the order of the agenda will be as follows. We will be talking about Colleen and Kate's compensation. We'll be talking about the school reopening, then tuition rates, then the SRO, and then we'll talk about the 4 status updates, and then we'll talk about the naming the new board member. And so there's nothing added to the agenda, it's just shuffled around a little bit. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, so we will be going into, I'll take a motion to go into executive session at 6:32.
So moved.
That was Nancy?
Yep.
And do I have a second?
Second, Chris.
Okay, and again, we will reconvene at about 7 o'clock for those of you who would like to join us for the rest of the regular meeting.
So who would you like to stay in executive session with you, Elizabeth?
I'd like you, and I'd like Colleen and Kate.
Okay, so everybody else could sign off.
Wait a minute. We need to vote on entering executive session, David.
Oh,
and
I'm sorry. Okay, good.
that is for Title I, Section 313, Part 3. All those in favor of entering executive session for Title I, Section 313, Part 3, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, thank you. And we'll see the rest of you at around 7 if you feel like it.
See you all back at 7. Okay, we are now back in public session.
Okay. So the next part of our public session is public participation. Is there
Elizabeth,
yeah.
could we wait a few minutes for that, just to make sure that most everybody who's coming back has come back?
Yes, absolutely. Announcements and celebratory comments from board members. Does anybody, besides extreme kudos to all 3 building leaders for what sounds like a remarkably successful kickoff, does anybody have any other announcements and celebratory comments?
This is a personal comment that a computer was left at the high school, and when I went to get it, there were just so many people helping and smiling and laughing, and I was very very happy to see all that.
Thank you, Nancy. Does anybody else have any announcements or celebratory comments? Hearing none, I will now go back to public participation, not related to the agenda. Does any member of the public have something that they would like to say? I can't see everybody, actually.
think we've got, yeah, there's a few people here from the public, so I don't know. Catherine Allen just came in. Christy Driver. Yeah, so if anybody has any comments, then you can either type your name in the chat box or we'll just move on.
Okay.
Sounds like none.
All right. We'll move on to the discussion of possible action items. The first discussion and possible action item is compensating Colleen and Kate and Jennifer.
Yeah, so I think this is a great point. Jennifer, for different reasons than Colleen and Kate, but all three of them, their contracts have a shorter year base. They're not year-round contracts, but which meant, that either they had a 210 or a 220-day contract. I'm just explaining this for the public's understanding. But because of all of the emergency work that had to go on this summer around planning, actually Colleen and Kate and Jennifer did work throughout the summer. So what we are going to try to do, and certainly, if the board wanted to make a vote on this, you certainly could. But I think what we should do is calculate, the number of days that were worked, look at the per diem for those days, and at least try to get the summer work compensated at that rate. We all know that we might have some future work to be done at Mount Escutney School District, or the Windsor School in particular, depending on the administrative model for next year as we move forward. But I think if we could get the summer worked out, that would be good. So we can certainly talk about that. I think, I think Colleen, Kate, and Jennifer would appreciate being compensated for that time. I think a credit to their integrity is that at no time during the summer did they ask for any additional money. I mean, this really has come, from the board and from me as a desire to compensate that time. So I don't know whether we want to make a motion to calculate a per diem based on the individual's rate, and then proceed to, compensate for the number of days worked this summer. I mean, we could make a motion and then discuss it, or discuss it and then make a motion. Can you see everybody, Elizabeth?
No, I can see about 16 people.
Okay. Bill has his hand up. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would be appropriate to, I don't think, and Elizabeth, I'll defer to you. I don't think we need to vote on calculating the per diem, but I think when it's all calculated, then we should vote on it.
Yeah, we could get those amounts. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that the taxpayers and know exactly what we're voting on, not necessarily the taxpayers, but the community members know what we're counting on. And I mean, I'm very open to voting yes, of course, because I think they've done a fantastic job, but I think that's probably the direction we should go.
And there would have been, in that 210 days or 220, and I couldn't remember today. I know Kate and Colleen are 210. Jen, I couldn't remember whether you were 210 or 220.
210.
210.
Mine says 210, yeah.
Yeah. So in that 210 days, because remember, a school year is 184 days. So that does leave an additional, 20, almost 30 days for work on student days, if you will, which is why I think in the end it'll work out fairly, and I think we're probably in the range of about 20 additional days, but I haven't just sat down at the calendar and counted them out, but that's my estimate. And then we take the per diem, multiply it by that, and then that would be the number. and I can come back with that number to the board.
If you could do that, I think that would be, if you three don't mind waiting another
Month.
bit to get that put through. Okay. Yeah.
I think it would be, this is just an idea, but I work a normal school year, but I have time during the summer, and they give me a summer contract. I see no reason why. Would it be possible to create a summer contract to contract that out for what they've already done?
Yeah, we could close the loop that way. We could do a summer contract. I'll probably ask Tina in HR what she thinks is the better way to do it, whether it would be in addition to their current contract or a separate contract. So I'll figure that out with Tina, and then I'll get those numbers out to the board, and I think we could probably have this wrapped by October. I'd want to run those numbers by all three of them as well. So, but I think the work done certainly deserves compensation. And again, I think it was a credit to their integrity that they never even mentioned it, but I think we need to do it. And I know you all think we need to do it.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move us along here to the school reopening is the next topic. And I saw your collective principals report, and it's really snazzy and well done. It's a really great principals report. Do you want to use that as part of your school reopening?
I think that'd be a great idea. Somebody want to share the screen?
I think Jen, well, kudos to Jen on that one. She designed it and invited me and Colleen in.
Okay, so do you want me to share that with everybody?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, that would be great.
Okay, let me see if I can just share the screen. Give me just a sec, sorry.
If you can't, I think I can, Jen.
Let's try this. Okay, do you guys have access to it? Can you see it now?
It's coming up. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So to start with, I think we just wanted to celebrate the I don't know what the right word is, but the awesomeness of starting school again and how excited we all were. Some things that we wanted to talk about and share included just the opening of school. We want to share the staff survey and talk a little bit about professional development. These are from the past, the Windsor and Albert Bridge opening ideas of how to make sure it's safe to reopen. They're the at a glance that have been updated, and they keep getting updated as we tweak things. Just a reminder, everything here is in progress. So feedback is helpful. These have not changed much since the last time we shared them with you. They seem to be working fairly well in terms of what we plan to do. We're not there yet, but it's still not this week, but the following week we should be jumping in small increments that our families, our children, and our teachers can handle to start increasing the school day remotely online in the afternoons. Let's see, I wonder if I can click here for the high school plan. I do not have access. That's okay. I saw it someplace else, and I bet somebody will share that as soon as they can. These are just PowerPoints that we've shared with our staffs as we've been going through it. But really what we wanted to share with you guys were just the joy and amazingness of the first days of school. One of the things I was really worried about is how will the kids come back? How will we all come back? And I think one of the things we all took away from this is that we value what we experience in the schooling environment, and the team effort it took to make this happen has been remarkable and awe-inspiring. So we have just kids are exploring, kids are together, they're safe, they're practicing, things that aren't easy, like social distancing and wearing a mask. But they're really excited to be back together. The teachers are excited to have them back. And so I just want to share the joy of the moment. It really is, I think, for all of us, a time to take a good deep breath, because we've worked really hard to get there. And we're there, right? We're doing it. The kids are here. The staff is here. Our parents have trusted us to do this work, and it's pretty exciting. So you'll see kind of the mix of outdoors, indoors with good spacing. And I've heard so many comments, I'm sure Colleen and Kate can share the same, of kids just saying how awesome it is to be back in the presence of their peers, how great it is just to be in school. Kudos to Jim Taft for the immense amount of work and learning he had to do this summer to get us all prepared. As an admin team, just some incredible supports around the board of people sharing ideas and doing research to get us there. So that's the reopening of school. I can share a little bit about our opening staff surveys. Just quickly at a glance, the interdisciplinary units, we've not asked our teachers to start this officially for a couple of weeks because we really just wanted kids coming in being comfortable. So we're not like putting a whole lot of pressure on it, but still people are jumping into it. They've already started in different ways of doing that. We have some comments on the side here that you can check out. The unified arts is that interdisciplinary work, just asking them how it's going. Almost half of it is okay or very well. So that's a pretty good start. Some of it has things like it doesn't apply to them. They weren't here to start the development of it, but overall, we're off to a really good start in that we only had 3 days before we took this survey. One of the big things that we took away from the initial survey was that almost all of our staff, so the blue and the red together, are feeling safe. So this is our staff. When we heard initially that there's a lot of concern, as there should be, after the first few days, there's a pretty good sense that they feel safe, that the things we have put in place have helped them to feel confident to a pretty good extent in being in school. And then there's some safety comments that we went through. There's a whole lot more, but these are just some samples of it. Cleanliness of buildings was something that was also asked about. And this is a place where it's really tough, right? Because not only are we trying to put all these things in place, but then we're trying to maintain a whole new idea of cleanliness of the building. And we're getting there. But in general, this is where we came out. We're at least at meets expectation, and the blues exceeds expectation. We've still got some room to grow here, but we'll get there. We'll get there. We had some good comments from that also. Problems to be solved in the different schools. For Albert Bridge, we've got to talk about after-school options. There's some real concern about just kind of the intermingling of different cohorts across districts, busing, dismissal, transition times mostly, right? Breakfast, lunch, co-planning, co-teaching, the Canvas VTVLC work, how we're going to do assessment in a helpful way and share progress with families, what to do about the playground, and the afternoon work. In Windsor's, I think some similar things. So how to address parents leaving before the temperature checks are done. It's part of our dismissal concerns as well. Canvas rosters, when to pick up, particularly families that have siblings in different groups. So like, I'm assuming the high school that leaves at 11 versus the older ones, how to move through the building in safe ways, what to do about extra food, playground structures, what to do about the remote classes. That's probably mostly about high school at this point. Perhaps for both of our schools, there's some concern about what if we ever have to go remote, what does that really look like? And then long-term planning of foreign language. For our professional development, some things we've really been able to dive into is giving staff opportunity to check out and explore the VTVLC, as well as some interdisciplinary units. Christy Keeney shared a great PowerPoint with us and some supports back in June, and they're still accessible to all our staff. In the first 2 weeks here, we've given time for our staff to really explore this work and create time for them to collaborate and just dive into the VTVLC and the interdisciplinary units. With our Trauma Transformed, I'll keep this kind of short. I won't read the whole thing, but essentially we're forming 2 different groups. We've got our leadership cohort that's been working with Dave Meldnick, a trauma-informed specialist, as well as a champions team, which will be meeting pretty regularly to think through and continue our progress in acknowledging and mitigating, hopefully, the impact of trauma for all of our students, and recognize that we're all going through some form of possible trauma right now, and how do we navigate that and help our brains stay online as effectively as possible. Collaborative problem solving, we've been collaborating with the Mount Scottney Hospital. They have done an amazing job in supporting this work, and we've gone through the first 3 days already as a staff for all of our teaching staff as well as some of our support staff in learning collaborative problem solving model. And that's where we are. And Kate, Colleen, feel free to jump in there, add anything I leaped over.
And we're thankful for the survey results, because all those places where staff gave us feedback are places that we can address and fix. So we're thankful for the feedback from the staff.
I have a question on the VTVLC. I saw or heard on VPR the other morning that there are wait lists in some schools. I'm not sure exactly what they were talking about, but has that been kind of the case? Are we kind of in the same boat with other districts across the state?
I think, and I see Greg on the phone and others on the phone that may know more than me, but I think we did start early, and I think Larry and our counselors have been pretty aggressive. And I mean, there's a mechanical problem sometimes with, getting kids their logins and their passwords, but I don't know that we've had anybody, any groups of kids waitlisted. I think all of our kids that needed to be accommodated were accommodated. Did anybody have anything else to add to that? Greg, did we get everybody into the courses we needed to get them into?
The short answer is yes. With VTVLC, the wait lists that you're hearing about are on-demand courses that would be facilitated by an outside instructor. And our staff did a really good job of pivoting and trying to facilitate as many courses as possible with our own instructors. Our VTLC stuff is pretty squared away because our teachers, those are our courses essentially. But yeah.
Yeah, that's good news.
Thank you.
I also, while Greg's on the phone, on the call, I don't want to embarrass him. Greg is our school counselor, and he and Jessica, the 2 high school counselors, middle high school, and I'm sure Colleen and Kate would agree to this, that they worked around the clock that last couple of weeks, getting every child scheduled, getting those. I mean, they just had their office floors mapped with, cards and kids and who would go where, and because it really was a complete redo of the schedule in a very short period of time. Once we decided on the model and we knew who was going to go remote, then we had to make those schedule changes. So Greg, I really appreciate that and all the work you did this summer.
Putting a schedule together takes many, many perspectives and many, many layers to coordinate. And Greg and Jessica did an amazing job. We could not have done it without them.
Well, thank you. What is Jessica's last name?
Jessica Vivian.
Sorry. Jessica Vivian. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we all they all were. Thank you very much, Greg and Jessica, for and also Colleen, Kate, and Jennifer, and David, and Katie Ahern, who I also see on here. Thank you all for all that you've done to make this all go as smoothly as it sounds like it did. Does anybody else have any questions or comments about the opening of the school?
I just wanted to point out, if you look at those pictures, we had told our teachers, you know, let's wrap around these kids and focus on social emotional, but they are hitting it out of the park. If you look at those pictures, you can see that kids are already presenting work. There's some kindergarten kids in there already working with their names. So they're going above and beyond what they were even asked to do.
I did see that. Actually, that was pretty cool. Okay, the next thing that I have on the agenda is a very brief discussion of tuition rates to local elementary schools. I believe our current tuition rate is either $17,500 or $18,500 for our elementary schools. And I wondered whether the board, as we can set the rate, whether the board would consider either changing that rate or tying the rate to make it variable. So, for example, tying it to somebody's income tax rate or something like that, so that it's not totally out of the question that somebody could actually pay to go to one of our two elementary schools.
A question: who would these people be?
We've had a couple of people from Reading who have inquired about it. Okay, Jennifer just said FY21 tuition is $17,800. So we've had people from Reading. We've also had, I think, at least one person from Cornish who have inquired about it. Bill?
Probably being the only person here, maybe not. When I worked at Pomfret, we averaged 10 to 15 tuition students at a time. And that was when we were still able to maintain one class for every grade, that was a significant chunk of change that pumped into our school. And we never charged full tuition, ever, just because adding, I think at the time, the student cost was around $15,000, $14,000 to $15,000, and the tuition rate was $10,500. That was the calculation we used. In that, it was a benefit to the school, added to our income, yet made it affordable enough for parents to pay that tuition. That tuition came strictly from parents. And the calculation came down to basically, when you add a student, you're not adding staff and textbooks and material to accommodate that student. You're able to accept that student knowing that they will fit into the organization that you have. So it doesn't increase the cost of educating by what the taxpayers are paying for. Yet it adds a significant amount of income coming in. So yeah, it is a huge benefit. We were able to keep that school at one classroom for every grade for probably 6 more years than what they did just from tuition students $3,000 to $4,000 below the actual rate. Now, that said, there are significant issues in play here in regards to special ed cost, the law revolving around it, and so forth. So those have to be, at a small elementary school like Pomfret, we were able to support all that. But really, it is a risky proposition to accept to accept tuition students. The law states very simply, if you accept tuition students as a public school, I don't think you can. I know you can't. You can't deny entry to students based upon need. So it is kind of a Pandora's box, and so there's the positive part, and then there's the negative part.
Bill, do you remember where those Pomfret kids, where were they coming from? Were they coming from schools that didn't have districts that didn't have schools, or were they just
no? They were. Yeah, we were the top elementary school in the state of Vermont by a significant amount. So they were coming from Barnard, they were coming from Woodstock, they were coming from even some from West Windsor. So they were local students in which parents who could afford that that tuition. So yeah, I mean.
Yeah. You always get we do get the inquiries. I mean, we don't get a ton of inquiries, but we do get inquiries. Elizabeth is absolutely right. And usually once you fire that number back at them, that this is our tuition rate, and all ed is done up until this point, and the board can establish, but I mean, he tends to figure the real K-12 cost. That's why we've never had an elementary rate and a high school rate. He just figures a rate. So that's the rate for everybody. But the board does have the right, as Elizabeth said, to establish a different rate if you wanted to. It would just be a question. I think timing would be critical in terms of looking at capacity and making sure we had a rationale for whatever mathematics we use to come up with that rate.
Yeah, and the other issue is that the so-called sending school doesn't have to pay for what's the term, special ed term, Katie, the cost above.
Oh, for the
extraordinary costs.
Extraordinary costs.
Yep.
They don't have to, and so that's the Pandora's box.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
At the same time, though, I don't believe that applies to New Hampshire students.
Yeah, that's
in that. Well, no, they wouldn't have to pay, but I believe we would legally be able to deny a student entry because they are from New Hampshire. So we could act like basically a private school for students who are not residents within the state of Vermont. Yeah, I may be wrong about that, but I know all the discussion at Pomfret was the risk we were taking based upon, if we allowed, which we did, tuition students within Vermont, we could not say no if that student had a extraordinary need. I do not believe that applies to students outside the state of Vermont.
You're probably right.
Does anybody have any interest in discussing this? Okay. Well, let's move on then. Then the next item on our agenda is the SRO, the school resource officer, which is the school police. I sent a query to Nikki Buck over in Heartland about their contract with the SRO that they have contracted with Windsor Police. And I circulated the contract, the Heartland contract, to all of you. Not everybody, but all the board members. And then in discussing it with David, discovered that that contract has not been updated since we became our contract with the Windsor Police has not been updated since we became a merged district. So it is a contract which needs to be revisited anyway, particularly because we're a 2-school district. I can show you the Heartland contract. I think it's 3 or 4 pages long. I don't know that it would be that fruitful to show it to you right now, rather instead of describing it. To describe it would say that the contract is non-punitive. It states outright that the SRO's job is to keep the student safe and not to participate in any disciplinary action. And I think it strikes a very nice balance. We certainly could not adopt their contract. We would have to figure out our own, but it strikes a nice balance between the requirements of the students and the requirements of safety. So did anybody have, just left, did anybody have a chance to read Heartland's contract for their SRO? Amy?
Amy said yes.
Oh.
Nancy says yes.
And I wondered, does Albert Bridge have a resource officer?
Yeah.
We share or Albert Bridge shares the Windsor officer, previously it was an extension of the Windsor contract. Now it's a district contract. So it would actually, it's something that we would need to work out.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth's point is a good point, that the history here, and I'll give you the 2-minute version or the 1-minute version. When we established the SRO in Windsor, we did that based on I think it was called a COPS grant, which has been, those have been very popular throughout the last 20 years. And essentially, what happens is there's a grant that's available, basically funds in sort of a degressive way, right? Each year, the amount of money you get on the grant goes down. So essentially, the first year you're paying for 25%, and the grant's picking up 75%. Then the second year, it's like 50-50, and then the third year, it's the other way around. We pick up 75, and the grant picked up 25. And the agreement was between the town and the school district. And I remember Tom Marsh drew up the agreement. And then what happened is, after those 3 years, all the grant money went away. And Tom, I think we just agreed to stay at that 75-25. The town picks up 25% of the cost of the SRO, and then we pick up the other 75%. But the truth is, we never made any changes to the agreement or updated the agreement, especially, as Elizabeth said, based on the merger. So I think it would simply be a matter of and I think we would try to incorporate some of the Heartland verbiage in there. The Heartland contract came afterwards, but I think it would be a matter of my just contacting, Tom Marsh and saying to Tom, because it was I think it was he and his legal department that put that together, and they also put the Heartland one together for review. I think it would just be a matter of saying to Tom, because it's basically a memorandum of agreement, right, between the town and the school district. And then we could look at that draft in October and make a decision as to whether we wanted to make changes to it, additions, deletions. I mean, if the board wants that to happen, we should make that happen. We've always just done it in the budget process, but we do not have a written agreement, and we probably should have a written agreement.
I think we definitely should. Does anybody else have any thoughts about it?
I think it's definitely important to have a written agreement stipulating the job portion within the state of Vermont. The behavior codes within state reporting are pretty specific on when police are called to intervene into a situation, and to take care of that confusion piece. Your SOS, not the SOS,
SRO, yeah,
SRO officer has to have a very specific job description. So when they are there, it is not considered that the police were involved in any way. If there's something that happens within the school and there's a disciplinary action that takes place, say a team has to take a student down, if that officer has a contract, then they are exempt as being considered being called that the police were involved. It just makes state reporting so much easier. And if there's any litigation involving the event, you can pull out your contract. And so this individual was there acting as their in their capacity of this contract. They were not acting within their capacity as an officer of law for the Windsor. It's a must.
I would like to have, or it would be my inclination to base our new contract largely on the Windsor, on the Heartland contract, but making adjustments for our district rather than basing it on the old contract and adding in some Heartland things. I would prefer, and this is just me, but I would prefer to have it be based on the Heartland contract, adding in some adjustments for.
So you like the way the Heartland one was worded?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of time went into that, an awful lot of time.
Can I just share a little backstory on that? When Heartland was looking to consider an SRO, both Tiffany and I went and talked with the community about what we saw as the value of the SRO. And I think from there, they developed their contract. So ideally, what Tiffany and I at that point valued in what we got out of that position is what Heartland then put into their contract largely.
So that would be my preference.
Yeah, we could do that. I'm sure we could have something by our next meeting that we could look at a draft. It's time. It's just one of those things that did fall through the cracks, but it's a pretty big one. So we should really get going on it.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, would you like a motion?
I don't know what the motion would be. Would it be
for David to begin discussion with Manager Tom Marsh to update the contract for our SRO?
That would be great. I'll take a motion for David to start talks with Tom Marsh to update our contract regarding the district's SRO.
So made.
Okay.
Second.
I have a question.
Yep.
Is the SRO on campus all day?
No, and that's why it's, the price is not 100%. We don't have 100% of his time, but he spends a fair amount of time in both buildings. I think, matter of fact, that's one of the things we also probably need to revisit. How much time is he spending in the buildings, and what is his role? And that's probably something Jennifer, Colleen, and Kate and I can discuss. But that is a question. Jennifer, you see him, but you don't see him every day?
We see him very rarely. But originally, when we first started it, we had Jennifer, I forget her last name at this point, Officer Frank, and we had every other week, once a morning, she would stop by and connect with the kids in some kind of lesson just to get familiar. Since then, it's transferred between a couple of people. And at this point, we see Paul, I don't know, maybe once or twice a month. But at this point, it's not at a predictable place. But then again, nothing's very predictable right now.
So all those in favor of adopting the motion to ask David to talk with Tom Marsh about renegotiating the SRO contract for our district, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay. I need to move on because we really need to be done by 8 o'clock, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. So I'm going to quickly move through these quick status updates. The first one is water tests at Albert Bridge. I inquired about the water at Albert Bridge since the building had been closed for a few months, and I just wanted to report out what the status was. Mike Howe, who does the water testing, said that since July 1st, he's tested for total coliform, nitrate, PFAS, and everything is good to go. So that's what that is.
Good.
For the student representation on the board, I forwarded the description that we worked on with Tiffany to all 3 building leaders. And I'm positive that they have not had time to start motion there. So I am bringing it up so that we can get it into motion by our next meeting time. Okay. Transportation between the 2 towns. I just was wondering how that was working out since I think it's different now. And
yeah, no, I think, Elizabeth, I'm glad it's on the agenda. Ed and I have a meeting. It was already scheduled, certainly prior to the agenda being built, but we have a meeting with Student Transportation of Vermont tomorrow at 3 o'clock at the central office. We've had a little bit. I've had not so much Ed, but I've had a little bit of an issue trying to get this paradigm shift with Vermont Student Transportation or Student Transportation of Vermont since we merged. In that, I think they were so used to doing this Albert Bridge run, and then they were used to doing the Windsor run, and they had a number of buses that did both those runs. And sometimes those buses would intersect, and we'd have kids meet at Albert Bridge, and then the Windsor bus would pick those kids up and take them to Windsor. But I've tried to get Mike and Brian, who's the owner of the company, and I'm going to try again tomorrow. And I think hopefully I'll be successful to raise that system up another 10,000 feet, because I think what they need to do is they need to look at the number of buses that they have, and they then need to look at where those bus stops are in Windsor and West Windsor. And then they need to repattern those buses so that, they're taking care of, the West Windsor kids that need to get to Windsor, and the West Windsor kids who need to get to West Windsor, and the Windsor kids who need to get to Windsor, if you know what I mean, and look at it as an entity, right? A district, like you would if you were devising a bus schedule for the Hartford School District, right? You wouldn't say, okay, how are we going to get the kids to Dothanbrook, and how are we going to get the kids? You'd look at the pattern of buses across the district and see, okay, maybe in the end, and this is the part I think the board's got to be aware of, if we want not so much door to door, but stop to stop transportation in both districts, and especially those kids who are now coming from Albert Bridge to Windsor, no longer by choice, but they're coming there by design, right? And this is the part that I've had trouble getting Mike and Brian to understand, that every single sixth grader last year, unless they moved out of the district or had some other plan, every single sixth grader came to Windsor. So it was our obligation to get those kids from the various stops to Windsor. We could no longer say to a parent, well, you get your child to Albert Bridge and we'll pick them up at Albert Bridge. That was okay when we were a choice district, but we're not a choice district. So, I mean, I don't want to drag this out too far. I'll let you know either via email or at the next meeting how successful I am with them. But what it might mean is if we were, as Colleen said, we were down a bus. It might mean bringing another bus back and figuring out how we're going to do that. Because right now we've got Wendy Moody, who's the transportation director, and April handles Albert Bridge. But we've got to get that merged and get those bus patterns merged. And so we're going to take one more shot at it tomorrow with the company, and I'll keep you posted. And that doesn't even begin to address, I see Katie breathing hard over there. That doesn't even begin to address the transportation needs to outlying districts, but that's a whole separate issue.
Well, thank you. I am interested to know how it comes out tomorrow, actually. And another status update question was on safety teams. I think there's a safety team meeting at the end of this month. Is that right? And I wondered how Alice training and Alice, the Alice, is working within the COVID-19 protocols.
Well, actually, there's been some adjustments in the protocols, not just the Alice training, the active shooter drills that we've all been schooled on and will continue to be. And we were one of the first administrative teams this summer. In the middle of all this craziness, we actually went through a tabletop exercise with the state and got a report back about about how we did. And that was just the administrative team and a few others, but we did that. But anyhow, to make a long story short, we now have to do less drills just because of the COVID-19, but we are still keeping our individual building-based safety teams in place and still using the Alice protocols in the same way. All those same patterns and commands are being used in the building. I don't know if any of the principals want to comment. I don't think we haven't had to have a drill yet. I think we only have to have one over the course of the year and one fire drill. And then the others can be, I forget what word they use, but the others can be
educational discussion.
Thank you. Educational discussion and with the children. So you're just kind of taking different sections of the building and talking about it. So did anybody else have any other update on that? But we're still using the Alice protocol, and that's worked for us.
Okay. Okay, and the last thing on here is the naming the new board member. And in fact, starting at 8 o'clock, I have 3 candidates for us to interview in executive session. So it's going to be tight. I have them on each for 10 minutes. So we really do need to be there at 8 o'clock. So I will, as such, take a motion, since we've just seen the principal's report. I'll take a motion to approve the principal's report.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the principal's snazzy report, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, and the batch of minutes from August 20th, which was quite long, but I thought they were really long, but they were fine. And August 20th, sorry, that was August 10th and August 20th was, you know, just a very brief snippet. Did everybody have a chance to read the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the previous minutes.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
okay. And all those in favor of approving the previous minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Looks unanimous.
Huh? It was
I
unanimous.
think it was unanimous.
One thing that we have not discussed is the Community Process Committee, which was supposed to get together. That's Chris, Amy, and me. We're supposed to get together in the last month, and we just simply did not have the time or bandwidth to do it. But I put it on old business so that we can recommit to doing that by October.
And Elizabeth, that was different than the innovation team, right? Is that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. And we had to, you know, we probably should get that on the next agenda too, because we need to look for a facilitator. We reached out, you know, to Jan, and she really can't do it. So
Okay.
I've got some ideas, but we can get that on the agenda and get, again, this environment makes it tough, but maybe, but not impossible. So we should talk about it.
I have for future agenda items, budget discussion, preliminary budget discussion. I'd love to talk about the end result of Portrait of a Graduate at our next meeting
Yes. Good.
and how that will come into play in our budget process. Because I think we should change our budget process this year to reflect the goals of Portrait of a Graduate. So I'd like to just talk about that.
Yeah, we can do that. And Elizabeth, the timeline there, just so you know, we have a special SU meeting Wednesday night. I don't know how many of you forgot that, but I know this board in particular has been meeting out the last couple of weeks. But Wednesday night, it should be very short. It's just because we had some policies we wanted to look at before the year started. And then we have our SU meeting on the 28th. And the idea was we do have a draft strategic plan. The idea was to vet that with the SU board, maybe have Mike walk us through that. And
Okay.
and that'll
Good.
be just in time for the October meeting.
Yeah, great. Perfect. So Portrait of a Graduate and the budget process. And I'm putting schools status on because we don't know where we'll be by October. So just in case. And then the community process update and innovation team. Does anybody else have anything else that they feel should be added to the next agenda? Okay. Hearing none, I will take a motion to enter executive session at 7:57 p.m.
So made.
Second.
Everybody.
Guys,
Could you stop recording, please? Bye, everybody. Thank you for
did
being
we
with
vote on that? Yeah, and I think we just want the board and me, right?
Yep.
Okay, good.